is Amr Henry, and I would like to apologize for yesterday. I think I had mixed up in the days for the dinner. I thought the dinner was today, so my apologies for that. Okay, so I'm gonna start my presentation right away. I'm the president of Regina, Saskatchewan Multi-Faith. I was also the president of Regina Multi-Faith a few years ago. So I'm coming from the multi-faith side. In my regular days, I'm a technical person. I'm a chemical engineer, and I work in research in carbon capture. So this is not really my area. So forgive me if it's not deep, detailed enough for you. So I was given the title of Overcoming Oppression based on perceived race, gender, and religious difference from a multi-faith perspective, because I have more experience just in Saskatchewan, so I'll mainly talk about that. Okay, so as you all know, we are in the 21st century, and regardless where we live, the country or the world has become a global village. You can see that at the university level with the, we are in the factory engineering where I work, we are at 30% international student, and maybe close to 90% for postgraduate. So, the university has changed in terms of, the students, in terms of faith and also in terms of race and so on. Multi-Faith Saskatchewan was created in 2007, mainly to assist other faith-based local organizations, Regina Multi-Faith and Saskatchewan Multi-Faith, to promote understanding, appreciation, and acceptance of diverse faith communities. So these are, a few items, a couple of items from the mission of Multi-Faith Saskatchewan. So it aims at assisting multi-faith groups in eliminating prejudices in all their forms, okay? Race, gender, faith-based, and so on, and to liaise with other provincial organizations with similar aims and objectives, but also with national organizations. So in terms of anti-racism, we participate in all religions proclaim universal brotherly love, but as we all know, they teach moral superiority and promote out-of-group derogation. Okay, so we try to avoid all these things on the multi-faith level. As a consequence of that, the history is littered with moments in which religion has provided the justification or has given a cause to all kinds of atrocities direct toward people of different race or culture. End of quote. So some of these quotations were taken from Hall and All, and they concluded that the motives for the religious to be religious are also the motives or the motivators for racism. Okay, so this is the journal. So in general, in Multi-Faith Saskatchewan and all the multi-faith association, we try to practice what we preach. So we participate in anti-racism campaigns, and Rona is sitting here on the left side. So we participate in community-based anti-racism rallies and so on. We have, with MCOS, we have edited and prepared a video with the title National Highway to Harmonize Canada on the 150th anniversary of Canada, and you really should Google that and see the video. It's just unbelievable. I think it's only can happen in Canada. I come from Algeria, so on the north part of Africa, and I will never see something like that happening in Algeria. Okay? We don't have this many faith-based, this many races, and this many people participating in the same project. And then we participate in the annual Sikh parade. In terms of talking about faith and gender equality, okay, so in general, most faith-based members or members with faith will tell you that they reject that their faith is calls for unequal inequality in genders. So many will attribute it just to the culture, okay, and which is at odds with the core principles of the region in itself. So the issues discussed in the study, and I encourage you also to look at that one, that paper. They discuss patriarchy, religious leadership, the role of, let's say, women in leadership positions and so on in all faiths, Islam, Christianity, Judaism, and so on. And then also the domestic division of work. Okay, and for many of them, equality does not mean sameness. Okay, so there is this trend in getting into gender role specialization that is reflected on appreciation of the different qualities and strength that each gender could bring. Okay, but still not gender equality. So that these comments were discussed in the study. So if you look at the tables there, it says it's about participants who strongly agreed that my religious tradition emphasizes equality of sexes. Okay, so the Buddhist and the Sikh and the Muslim comes at the top, even though it says these are the numbers of participants, so maybe there are issues with the numbers, but these are the numbers are shown, and these are numbers also for men. So in general, for Buddhists and Sikh, this is not an issue. But another study published in 2016 shows that the more non-religious people in the country, the more gender equal that country tends to be. Okay, and you can see the numbers there. Sorry, it's a little bit blurry. It's usually North European countries where they're non-religious. The number of non-religious population is high as compared to some of the African countries here and the Middle East. Okay. My own opinion is, with time, nuances develop in the religion, in the faith itself, and things change if you are in Canada compared to if you are back home in Africa or in the Middle East and so on, because you are a faith minority. And the French have been talking about French Islam and not just regular Islam because of the changes they want to introduce. Religious intolerance. So obviously, multi-faith is the core of the work of multi-faith is about religious harmony. So we asked the premier and then the speaker of the legislative body in assembly in Saskatchewan to introduce in the opening prayer of the legislative session other than Christian, and this happened in 2018, and we have asked that this is continued. Okay, we are supporting World Religion Day held at the synagogue every year. We started 10th of Abraham, and then we found out that it's not inclusive of everybody, so we changed it to Open Tent of Compassion, and gonna see some pictures later on. We have sent support letter and organized vigils for attacks against the Jews in Pittsburgh, the Muslims in Christchurch, and the Christians in Sri Lanka. We also have a wonderful visual art project, and this is one of the brochures in there, and some of the art done by high school student from grade 9 to grade 12 is just unbelievable. The winner of this session this year, I think Rona is here. I think he wants to sell his portrait. Yeah, it was bought by AMCOS. Okay, I can even say the number, $2,000. So for a high school student, this is unbelievable. And I think he's a refugee and wants his family to bring his family back to Canada. So it's really an unbelievable thing. And we are, discussing in the board what we can do with these things, because some of the art is just, almost professionals. And we participated in Islamophobia campaign where we brought Zarqa Nawaz. She's, the creator of Little Mosque in the Prairie, and just an unbelievable speaker. So these are some of the pictures. We organize multi-faith fairs at the University of Regina here on campus. This is the open tent of compassion, the brochure of the advertisement, and this is some of the people attending. And then we have an unbelievable sacred space built in Craig, 120 kilometers north of Regina. And the view is just breathtaking. And if you are going to Saskatoon, please stop by. It represents all faith and including First Nations, and it's just a great achievement. We have sponsored two families, Syrian families. One we had them when they came, and the other one we sponsored from the beginning with raising more than $50,000 for the family. And we supported them for 18 months. Their wife and two kids. The husband was killed in Syria, two very young kids, and the grandparents. We found after we brought the grandparents, we were counting on the grandfather to work and help after the 18 months, but he had some issues with his heart, so it became very complicated. So, being a Muslim and a woman, and in Canada with no English, an English barrier. So we try to help all we can, and I think they have been helped, and they are surviving quite well. Okay, this is a quotation that I found. It talks about the multidimensionality and interconnected nature of race, religion, class, and gender hierarchy are especially visible to those who face oppression along more than one dimension of inequality. And the Syrian family that we had, embodied exactly that. They had a lot of hurdles to. And I can tell you a story. The lady has a hijab, and she had the bus driver pass by and not stop just because she's the only one waiting for the bus, and he saw her hijab and he just drove by. Okay, and this was done more than once, so we tried to intervene and on her behalf and so on. So they really faced a lot of issues. MS Multi-Faith Saskatchewan participates in many food banks. This is the title from the leader post. I didn't want to put the pictures of the families, but you can Google them. Worldwide Connections, we, with the help of Luther College, we organize NAIN, okay, which stands for the North American Interfaith Network Conference in Regina in 2015. It was just an unbelievable conference, and for our good luck, we made money out of that conference. So we have something like $15,000 sitting and we are using it for multi-faith work, research work at Luther College and at the university and so on. And we brought the Commissioner of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada as a speaker with Zarqa Nawaz, and we also work with UN related association in terms of multicultural council and so on. In conclusion, and this is a little bit dry, so multi-faith members, we will always seek common ground and demand respect of all religious beliefs. We promote gender equality, we reject any type of oppression, and promote civility and resist social polarization. I think if you come and sit in one of our meetings, you're gonna appreciate that and feel that we really, have really very good common ground. So members have been making positive change in their communities, speaking at different educational institutions. We speak to high schools, we speak in universities, we speak in SAS Polytech. We are all over the place. We also deal with health issues of faith-based of people in general. So if there is a death, if there is any issue related to faith, we are contacted by hospital officials. We organize open doors events in the synagogue, in the Gurdwara, in the Buddhist temple, in the mosque, and so on, and also in community centers for the general public. And these are some of the pictures. We have a vigil for Christchurch, vigil for Pittsburgh. This is some of the awards that we have been giving, and some dinners of appreciation. And we get the multi-faith calendar from AMCOS, and we distribute it. Okay, thank you very much for your attention.
I want to thank ASERN for giving me this opportunity to speak to you today, or to speak about who I am, what the work we do, and what I would like to focus on. I haven't prepared any slideshow like the rest of you did, but I'm just a very community-based person who works at the community level. So I'm not one of the academics from whom you're going to get a lot of data, but I will speak to the context of the South Asian community that I represent, being the executive director of the South Asian Women's Center in Toronto, which is about 36 years old. So I myself am an Indian Christian woman who migrated to Canada in 1990 and is, of course, Canadian now. That is my identity. But I want to focus on the internal oppression and the external oppression that women face within the community, and I will focus particularly within the context of the South Asian community, but also intercepted will be my own struggles in understanding and coming to those realizations. I'm going to keep it short because I know that time is running out. I want to, and this goes back to the whole issue around identity and women. So what happens when we immigrate to Canada? So I came in my late 30s, early 40s. So did my husband, so do many others. We come here to look for a new life for our families. It ends up that mostly the women may find some work because they are so engaged in ensuring that their family survives that they're prepared to do anything. Very few men in those days were able to find work that was suitable to their professional abilities at home. In other words, their credentials were not realized. As a result of that, many women just absorb the home setting, the home environment, the depression that your spouse faces because they're unable to get a job suited to their level at home. The children who face racism, and we don't recognize it often, but your kids do face that racism. And then our own struggles with keeping the home fires burning and working. I was fortunate to work at the Saskatchewan Action Committee on the Status of Women, which was a very mainstream women's organization. My focus was to make it much more, in many ways, more accepting of other communities. There was a lot of racism within the women's movement at that time. We have to acknowledge that that was the reality, and I know because I was with the National Action Committee on the Status of Women, which essentially was brought down by women themselves who would not stand shoulder to shoulder with women of color, but then women of color themselves decimated themselves by saying, I am more oppressed than you are, or you are more oppressed than I am. And I think this does not discount our oppressions, but it goes back to the feeling, it goes back to the place that in order to build that capacity, that sustainability for women's voices to be heard, and that ability to ensure that we are able to understand one another and support one another, it is not about the power that I have, but it is the power that I share with all my sisters in that movement in moving forward. And that was very hard for us to understand, even as women of color. We were trying to occupy those spaces. When you get that space, you think, okay, you know what? I'm here. Now I have the power. But it is a false sense of power because we always imagine that we are greater than somebody else. So my work at the agency where I work is basically we have counselors who speak many languages, 14 South Asian languages, but we also have a Portuguese counselor and a Spanish counselor. So we've expanded beyond the South Asian realm. We don't turn anyone away. We have served 17,000 clients in Toronto alone. So what do we do? So let's say a woman comes through our door and we talk to her. The counselor will talk to her. She'll do the intake, the assessment, the referral. Many of them went through a lot of abuse, go through abuse, because they make excuses. My husband hasn't found work, or whatever the reasons, and life becomes very difficult. So we try to make their life easier. Some of them come out of the struggle, and then we are very quick to say, she is a survivor, without understanding the pain that has brought her there. As I'm talking about women of color as well as all other women. We're very quick to take on those labels. So we say she's a survivor, but she's more than a survivor. She's a woman who has actually empowered herself to get out of that abuse and to become who she is. Would you agree with me on that? So I say, the word survivor that we keep using so loosely, which is such a mainstream word, is essentially a word that puts us in a place of disempowerment and no hope. So that is some of the oppression that women themselves are able to, I think we need to get rid of those barriers and those name calling and that kind of a label. The more important issue for us is to be able to stand together to build that real community and to sustain ourselves. I want to go back to my own story of what they call survival. I don't mean to be facetious, and I'm not going to speak down to anything, but it's my own what happened to me. When I was in Saskatchewan, I was at an equity conference on human rights and inclusion, just like this one. So, you want me to stop? And so what happened is, there were different caucuses, and I used to be the chair of the women's caucus. And there was the gay and lesbian caucus, and there were many other caucuses. Anyway, the union top brass did not like me. I was too mouthy. So they got me voted out. That was okay, but at the conference, what ended up happening was, there was a woman who spoke at the mic. She said, I was lesbian, I was at the gay and lesbian caucus, and I was voted out because I'm the only woman on that caucus. So I thought, okay, let me be bold and let me speak about my issue. And I got up. Believe it or not, 2 weeks later, there were 5 women, Caucasian women, 5 women, who had written letters about how they felt harassed because I had spoken about this issue. And I hadn't even said 2 sentences. So then began the whole issue with the union and myself, and I thought I was strong enough to combat it. So I went right ahead and I met with them and I wrote to them, and they appointed an investigator. The investigator met me one day before she released her report. She didn't meet with any of my witnesses, nobody. And of course, I was suspended from the union for a year for not behaving, not being compliant with their policies, for harassing 5 women, for speaking about equity at an equity conference. Okay? So I said, well, I carry this badge of honor. There was a wonderful young lawyer upcoming at that time. She said, I'm going to take your case to the Human Rights Commission. 8 years it was at the commission. 8 years. At the end of 8 years, what did the commission do? They said, we agree that this complaint should never have gone forward. But we also want to let you know that there's no racism in this. So I said, 5 Caucasian women and me, woman of color, speaking up, and I was harassing them, and that's not. Anyway, I don't want to dwell on it. What I want to say is that I more than survived that situation. I my case became, it's there in the books for those who are there from the commission, you can look at it. I think it was more important for me to use that as a learning, to go out and try to help others in the community who needed that support. As a woman in Saskatchewan, combating racism was very tough for me. That is the reason why I had to leave. And I went to Ontario, where I've got a beautiful job, and I'm doing my work, and I'm doing it well. But this is what I mean. There was a big community. I had a few community people like Christine. Christine stood by me at that time. You were the commissioner, remember, at the Human Rights Commission? But there were very few others. People were afraid to speak. People were afraid to speak. They said, you know, Kripa, you're not going to, why don't you just, I'm just giving you these examples because these struggles become our own in isolation, and they should not be. My struggle is your struggle, and your struggle is my struggle. As people of color, we need to come together. I can tell you I belong to, and this is no different in Toronto, I belong to a group of EDs called the South Asian EDs Network. I basically got out of it because there are about 10 men and 2 women, and the men are constantly talking. They don't give you a chance, or if you give your ideas, they snub you. So I simply decided that I had to do my work in the background with whoever I could find among the women that I knew to do my work. So that is the kind of challenge we face within the community. So that is the external and the external challenges we face, I've already given you the example, but the internal challenges, let me give you an example from women who during the previous federal government, I don't know how many of you are aware, but that the CPR was brought in. The CPR was a clause within the immigration clause that if you had not been married for 2 years and resided here, it was a conditional permanent residency clause. If you had not resided here for 2 years and you were not married, then you were being sent back. And we had the caseload at our agency increased enormously. Many of these women were thrown out of their homes. They were abandoned not just by their spouses, but by their mothers-in-law and their sisters-in-law. This is very true in the South Asian community in very traditional homes. I have to be very honest. We saw it. And then we would get into action to make sure that she was able to get a lawyer, so that she was able to get a TPR, so that's a temporary permanent residency requirement. But it was hard to do that because it was not possible because they were living at that time. Now, I will say that this government has done away with that, but they did away with it very recently, about 2 years ago maybe. And in the meantime, there were many, many women. There was one woman particularly, 23 years old, came here from the airport. You want me to stop? I'm winding up. Came to us from the airport. And she was only 23, the only daughter of her parents. And at the airport, the officials sent her to us because they said, you are on a deportation list, but you have time to appeal your case. She went back. There was no way we could do anything with her because she had absolutely no way of getting any kind of help. So we face those external barriers, but we also have our own internal setup where there are barriers to women because we ourselves have not been able to support the women in the community by helping them. So men need to come forward. They need to really be there to help. I know. You're bad.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
How come you push me out and not the others? Because I'm able to be pushed over?
No. Because actually, I felt that Kripa's section helped us to understand the importance of understanding the intersection of oppression based on race, like the major presentation that was made by Dr. Juliana, Julian, and then the presentation by Dr. Henny on mad faith, how we are oppressed also through religion, like religious differences, and then gender, and then the cultural layer. She also outlined that. In the interest of time, I don't know whether you can excuse us and just maybe use that to say that was the purpose of the session that we've just gone through, and we're just going to move right into the courageous conversation because it's part of what we are actually doing, helping us to understand that all these things intersect and that we need to be very careful that we're not oppressing somebody because we are still caught up in Kripa is a different race from mine, and women fighting each other and oppressing each other, and men, women kind of things, and mother-in-law and a daughter, and then also the implication of Canadian policy, how Canadian policy can all of a sudden create turmoil in a family to bring out those issues. In a way, I'm thinking maybe that Canadian policy was meant to promote equality, and then it unearthed the abuse that was already there in the family. I think those connections are starting to become clear. So please, Flo, come in front. You're the one moderating the next session. We are starting it at about 11:20. So you can see the time frame we have, and maybe Flo will help us figure out how we are going to transit to lunch that way.
Thank you very much, Christine. Listen, folks, you've been very patient, and we're hearing such important information and stories. Want to be respectful of that. Christine, thank you for your attempts to help move things along, too. It's not an easy job. It's not an easy job. And then you've all been sitting for a long time. So before we go into the courageous conversations, two things. One, if you need to stand up and stretch, please do so. Now, I'm going to speak on behalf of the presenters here, knowing nothing about whether they agree or not. But as invited, please step out. If you need to get a beverage or something to eat before lunch, just do it kind of quietly, respectfully. We know how to do that. We're adults. So I'm here to help host and facilitate this section, Courageous Conversations. I'm going to forfeit my 5 minutes of presenting ideas, concepts, because listen, the people who are about to share their conversation with us, they speak for themselves. But I want to just mention, last night, our elected officials said that, look, we are not the problem here in this room. We are part of the solution. And as that necessity to speak with each other and sing to the choir, as it were, that is so important. We should not negate the importance of hearing each other, our stories, our ideas, our thoughts. And for each person and each organization that brings forward their history, their stories, their information, we become stronger with that. So would you please give one big round of applause for the presenters who are about to spend the next 45 minutes with you.